All right, so what have we learned so far from Georgia's spring practice? We're a scrimmage into it, which means we're actually closer to the finish than we are to the beginning. Uh, there's a couple of things that we've learned so far, and I think first of all, what I'd start with is it looks like there might be more depth on the offensive line than we suspected. Here's what Kirby Smart had to say about Georgia's offensive line. Now, let's keep in mind that this is a team that is returning uh, four of five starters on the offensive line. I mean, that's a pretty solid group coming back to begin with. So here's Kirby talking about Austin Blasky as well as Ernest Green. Okay, two guys that did not start last year. He said, talking about Austin Blasky, says he's a competitor. I don't know if there's anybody on the offensive line that practices as hard and as physical as he does day in and day out. He doubles as a center too. Let me stop right there and just say this. If Cedric Van Pran is out, Blasky is probably going to be the center in 2023. So let's just keep that in mind as we move forward. Kirby goes on to say he goes in and plays center well, so he's very intelligent, works very hard. He's really good on our loose plays. He can cover down. He's athletic, and then he starts talking about Ernest Green. He said he's doing a phenomenal job as well. Ernest gives us something we didn't have the last couple of years. Georgia's had multiple players who have gone on to be, either first round guys like Broderick Jones or really good players like Jamari Sawyer in the NFL. And Kirby's saying we haven't had guys like this the last couple of years. He says in the run game, he's very physical. He moves people. Those two guys, talking about Blasky and Green, are battling it out there. We have the ability to flip it too. They just can't all be on one side. Whether it's Amarius Mims out there at left, you have to have at least a couple of tackles that can flip, go back and forth. They both have done a good job doing that. So I'm going to stick with this for a second, okay? So if you don't understand that the offensive line is really important in football, this is not the this. You should go to another. You should go to someone else who talks about Georgia because this is usually a very serious conversation. Having Let's just say that Georgia again, we know that they're relatively comfortable with four or five guys. All right, we're just going off memory. Mims, Cedric Van Pran, Tate Ratledge, and Xavier Truss. We know that those guys have started in the biggest games you can play. SEC championship games, national championship games, semifinal games. If you are adding two people that can play in that group, okay, because you're going to lose Trust this year, you're going to lose Van Pran, and you're going to lose Mims. Those guys are all going to be gone. Whether Tate Ratledge leaves after this season, we'll see. I'd be a little skeptical about that, but we'll just see, right? I mean, we don't know. If you're adding these guys to a group of four and you say we're really comfortable with six guys, and they may be more comfortable, I mean, they may be comfortable with more than six. That's really learning something. Okay. That is something that, and I could be projecting here a little bit, but I don't know that I am. If you are comfortable with Green and Blasky coming in and really playing, that means in the future you have at least a tackle and probably a center. That's a big deal for a football team. I mean, the two spot. The thing about it is that I think if you're talking just after the national championship game when Cedric Van Pran was seriously considering leaving, um, that would be the spot that you'd be most concerned about would have been center. But he's come back, and the guy is 29-1 as a starter. That's pretty good. So anyway, so we've learned that there's some depth on Georgia's offensive line. Okay, I'm just mentioning those players. What we've learned about the quarterbacks is, you know, what I would say is they're not quite there yet, right? I mean, and I don't know. I don't know because we only see so much, all right? But I don't know if this is normal spring stuff, which is my suspicion, or if it's a volume thing where, certain guys only get so many snaps because we don't know who the number one is yet right now. My suspicion is that it's Carson Beck, but we don't know, right? I mean, and Vandergriff has a different set of tools than Carson. Anyway, here's what Kirby said yesterday after the scrimmage. He says, I can think of some really good things that each guy did, talking about Vandegrift and Carson. I think some poor things that each did. It's not like one guy is sticking out. Carson has a really good command of the offense. He understands it inside and out. He communicates it. He gets things correct. He had a couple of poor decisions and choices today, but he also made some plays, some really fine throws. I'm going to come back to what Kirby just said. Um, he goes on to say Carson Beck has a really good presence in the pocket, moves around. Brock made some plays. He made some plays getting out of the pocket, made some good throws. He had a couple of downfield throws that I think he wished he had back to give us a chance at some 50-50 situation. Keep the ball in balance with that. He did a really good job in the 2 minute. I mean, I think if you're Carson, you've got some work to do on the he had a couple poor decisions and choices today because you're going to make bad throws. Like it's hard to explain. Sometimes, well, it's not that hard to explain. Sometimes you just don't hit free throws, I guess is the way to put it. But it's the decision making that really is what set Stetson Bennett, Jake Fromm. It's what set the guys who have started 6 of Kirby's years at Georgia, or no, I'm sorry, five. Those guys basically they played the position well, and that's the part we don't know about Carson Beck. That's the part we don't know about Brock Vandegrift. We know that Brock Vandegrift has another gear that Beck does not have. So, in order for Beck to win the job, he's going to have to be consistently good. I don't know if Kirby's telling the truth when he says one guy is not sticking out. I mean, people seem to think that Carson Beck will be the starting quarterback, but that's not decided at all. DoorDash, we can't do these videos without them. We're very thankful of their support. Get a 50% off your first DoorDash order for up to $20 value when you use the code DAWG, DAWG at checkout. It's a limited time offer and terms apply. Don't forget the code is DAWG, DAWG for 50% off your first order with DoorDash. The link is right down below. And I think when you start talking about these quarterbacks, what we've learned is there's not a starter yet. And that's okay. I mean, I would suggest that you've got until probably game 3 or 4. And yeah, I don't think you have to have a starter going into South Carolina. I think it would be ideal, but you don't have to have a starter going into that game. Now, fast forward, fast forward 5 months from now and see if I have the same tune. I don't know that I will, but I think it will become evident what's going on. That's the thing about college practices. Everybody knows the deal. I mean, because you're sitting there practicing about 2 hours. Everybody knows who's good and who isn't. And if they're not, Kirby's trying to, go with competition here. Um, and there's nothing wrong with that, but the team probably knows what's going on. And if there's confusion, then they really don't quite yet have a quarterback. And that's probably not ideal. The other thing that we know is that Georgia, right this second, is a little thin at 2 spots in particular. They're both on the offensive side of the ball. Tight end, just because, there's you don't have all of your guys. You have 4 scholarship tight ends, if I'm not mistaken. Let me look at the board. Yeah, right now, I mean, Eric Gilbert's gone from last year's team. Darnell's gone. Ryan Godey's gone. So you don't have a lot of the guys that you've had in the past. And then Pierce Sperling is hurt. So you're down at tight end. And that matters because why does that matter? That matters because there's some things you'd like to do sort of in special teams. That would be easier with your tight ends because tight ends play special teams a lot, and they're almost always first, second, third team. I mean, tight ends are going to be out there, so that's one thing. The other thing is you just want to function as an offense, and having all of your tight ends out there is important. The lead here, though, is they're really thin at running back right now, and you do not have Kendall Milton out there. Edwards is out there, sparingly. You've got Robinson out there. In some of the highlights, he was one of the only running backs you saw in the highlights, which is not I mean, that doesn't really mean anything. So, and they can show whatever they want to show in the highlights. They select them, but I think they got to be careful right now at running back. I mean, you're still waiting for Paul to come back. Really, your only truly healthy scholarship running back right this second, unless my math is wrong, is Robinson. That's it. So I think for the Dogs, we got 2 weeks, or 13 days before G Day. I personally have said this many times. I think this is going to be a fun G Day. I think this is going to be a G Day worth watching, a G Day worth coming to. And by the way, if you are not signing up, if you do not, it's free. If you do not have our newsletter, you really need to do it. I mean, today alone, Sunday, I just watched the college national championship for the women, an entertaining game to be sure. You've got story from Matt DeBerry about Carson Beck. On Friday we've got story. There's another story about Carson Beck. So probably too many stories about Carson Beck right now. What did Kirby have to say? How about the highlights from the scrimmage? How about Matt DeBerry's report from the 5-star weekend for the Dogs? There's a lot that you're going to miss out on if you're not subscribing to our newsletter. There's just so much, and the bulk of the stuff that we do is not pay. I'll talk about what's pay in due time, but make sure you are signing up for our newsletter, y'all. The link is right down below because I cannot possibly put into context in a 10 to 15-minute video everything that we have on the site. There's just too much stuff. There's too much banter. You're missing out. Make sure you're signing up for the newsletter. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the website.